La présidente,
Speaker of the House,
Mesdames et Messieurs les députés,
Members of Parliament,
cette épreuve de vérité,
this is a trial of truth. As
avec
leader
l'assentiment du
of
président de la
the
République, je l'ai voulu.
government,
J'ai voulu ce
with
rendez-vous.
backing of the French
Certains d'entre
president,
vous, les plus nombreux,
this is a trial which I wanted to be
ont
put to.
pensé que c'était déraisonnable, que c'était un
Some
trop
said
grand
it
risque.
was unreasonable, some said it was too much of a risk. However, I feel it is the exact opposite. The greatest risk would be to take no risk,
C'est continuer les choses sans que rien
to
ne change.
let things keep on going as they currently are,
Comme d'habitude,
to do politics as we always have,
sans prendre les décisions
to
qui
keep enduring a situation without enduring sanctions that need to be brought
on
in,
arrive au bord de la falaise.
for us to walk
Car ce
beyond
que
the
nous
cliff's
traitons
edge.
aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas une question politique.
The question that we have before us today is not one of politics. It is a matter of history.
Ce sont celles qui concernent
Politics,
les partis,
that is up to the political
les
parties,
uns avec les autres,
rivalries between one and
et
the
les
other,
questions de pouvoir, les questions historiques.
issues of power.
Ce sont celles qui concernent
Historical questions are one about people
les
and
questions
nations.
politiques, ce sont celles qui
Political
concernent
questions
les adultes
are
qui
ones
se disputent tout
about
le temps,
adults
les
who are
questions
always
historiques, ce sont
fighting.
celles qui
Historical
concernent
questions
les enfants. Et le monde que nous leur
are
construisons.
also about the children and the world that we are building for the future.
Les questions politiques
Political
sont les
questions
questions pour
are
la prochaine élection.
questions for upcoming elections,
Ce sont les
but
questions
historical
pour la prochaine
questions
génération.
are ones for the generations to come.
Questions pour demain qui se jouent aujourd'hui.
Questions about tomorrow
Tous
which
nous
need an
savons
answer today.
que notre pays, au-delà de
We all
l'orientation décisive
know
qui va se trancher aujourd'hui,
that in
se trouve
spite
devant un
of
immense champ de questions
what the outcome of today is going to be, is that there is going to be a
des
major
changements profonds.
change that needs to
Je
come
veux
in the
quelques
coming
minutes,
years.
en 5 minutes, vous citer les plus graves de ces questions.
And I would just like to take a few
Nous
minutes
sommes
to
devenus depuis l'an 2000
remind you of what that
un
situation
pays
is.
qui produit moins
Since
que les autres,
2000,
moins que ses
we are a
voisins.
country that has produced less,
Notre retard
less
de
than
production
its
sur nos
direct
voisins les
neighbors,
plus proches,
our
qu'ils soient
closest
allemands ou
neighbors, be it Germany.
mesuré par
or
le PIB
Belgium.
par habitant,
We have
est
lower
de
GDP per
15%
capita.
notre retard. Et sur nos voisins néerlandais,
Our
plus de
Dutch
30%.
counterparts,
Et ce,
are
malgré les
streaming ahead of
efforts
us.
faits ces dernières années
and
sur
despite what
la
we have tried to
création
do over the past few
d'entreprises,
years
sur
through
l'emploi,
creating
sur
jobs,
l'investissement, par exemple,
companies,
avec France 2030.
investing through France 2030,
Imaginez ce que seraient nos
imagine
revenus familiaux
what our family
ressources de
incomes
l'État
would have been and what our
si
state
nous
coffers would
disposions
have
de
been
15 ou 30%
if we had some
plus à partager,
15 to 30%
de
extra,
salaires de 15 à 30% plus importants,
15 to 30% extra on our pay,
15 plus
15 to 30% on our state coffers to work with, in addition to what we
La
currently
France
have,
n'aurait aucun
where we
problème
currently
de
stand, where we would be
Elle n'aurait
on
pas
par
de
with our
problème de
neighbors.
dette.
If that were the case,
La production,
France would not
c'est
have
donc
a
une
debt
urgence
crisis.
nationale.
We would not be where we are today.
Et pas sans lien,
And at the same time,
nous sommes
a
devant un
direct
immense
corollary
problème
of that
d'éducation
is that
nationale.
there is a great issue in terms of
Notre
national
école,
education.
notre collège,
Our
notre
schools,
lycée,
our middle
notre
schools,
université,
high schools, universities,
jadis autant d'exemples
and
la
now
planète entière
that were once
sont aujourd'hui déclassés
exemplary
avec
and
une chute
leaders
sur
on
la
the global
maîtrise des
stage,
fondamentaux,
and now falling
l'écrit,
behind in terms of
sur la
fundamental
lecture,
learning,
sur la
in terms
langue,
of reading,
sur
writing,
l'arithmétique élémentaire, des
languages,
difficultés sur
maths.
l'orientation, trop précoce, en
We
tout cas pour moi,
are falling
trop
behind.
angoissante,
Our children
trop
are falling
mécanique,
behind.
et n'assurant pas la promesse républicaine, égalité des
And
chances,
because
d'où qu'on
of
vienne.
that,
Et s'il le
our
faut,
children can no
deuxième
longer
chance.
fully enjoy
Et encore,
the
troisième chance.
Republican promise that has been made
Nous
to
sommes
them.
devant une immense question de modèle
A
social.
vast question is before us, one about our very
Inventé
social
il y a 80
model
ans sous
that was
l'inspiration du
created
Conseil
some
national
80
de la
years ago
Résistance et aujourd'hui gravement
under the
déficitaire,
former Council of the Resistance Fighters
déstabilisé
and
par le
is now
déséquilibre démographique,
thrown into
par le
disarray
vieillissement des
because
Français
of the aging
et par le
population
déséquilibre du
and
système
because of
des
the
retraites.
imbalance that we have in our pension
Nous sommes
system.
devant une immense question du logement,
We have a great issue when it comes to housing, housing for
de
families,
l'allocation à la propriété pour ceux
trying
qui le
to
souhaitent,
become homeowners
Logement
if they
des
wish to,
jeunes,
housing
logement
for
des
the young,
étudiants
for
et même
students,
jusqu'au logement d'urgence.
even emergency
Le modèle
housing.
est à réinventer.
Our model needs to be
Nous sommes
overhauled.
le pays du monde qui a le mieux identifié l'enjeu écologique.
We
Le
are the country in the
développement
world that has clearly identified the
production
environmental
décarbonée.
issues at play, how we have
C'est
to go
une
for
fierté,
carbon-free
mais en
energies
un
more
temps
than
où
any
cet
other
enjeu
nation.
est battu en brèche partout sur la
This
planète.
is an
C'est un
issue
défi de
which
mobilisation
is
générale.
unfortunately losing traction
Nous
around the
sommes
world,
devant
so we
une
need to
immense
live up to
exigence et
it.
une inquiétude
There is great
liée à la
concern in terms of safety,
à la sécurité de tous les jours,
our
au respect de
day-to-day
l'intégrité des biens
safety
et des
and security,
personnes. Et nous savons que cette
protection of people
inquiétude,
and
c'est
goods. And
d'abord
we know that this
celle
is
des
a
plus
concern
fragiles.
which is
Et donc,
most
sécurité
deeply
et
felt
justice,
by the
ce
most
sont les
vulnerable,
deux faces de notre premier devoir d'État.
and therefore
Nous
it
sommes
is because
devant la
of a
question que
failing from our
l'immigration
state.
pose à notre pays et à nos sociétés. Les migrations
We have a
liées aux
great
différents
question in terms of
développements,
migration,
à
all
la
forms
misère
of
chez les uns
migration.
avec une démographie expansive,
When we look
à
at
l'abondance
booming
chez
global
les autres,
populations, when we
avec
look
une
at
population déclinante, sans compter la
people
déstabilisation
leaving
climatique.
their countries from around the
Nous avons
world,
donc deux obligations.
due to
contrôler
all
et
forms of
maîtriser
reasons,
les
we
arrivées
have
et intégrer ceux qui
duties.
sont et
We have
seront là,
duties
les
to
intégrer
take
dans ma
in
conviction,
people when we can,
par le
and
travail,
when
par
they
la
do
langue,
enter our
par
nations, we have to
l'engagement à
help them
respecter nos
through work,
principes de vie.
through language learning, and
Et je
through
dois
a
ajouter
general understanding
l'aménagement du
of our
territoire dans
principles.
l'Hexagone, avec des
So throughout
déséquilibres entre
France, we
les
have seen
métropoles
an
et les nouveaux
imbalance
déserts français,
between what is happening in
transport,
major
équipement,
cities
centres
and
de
rural
décision.
areas
Les
where
territoires
too many
sont
decisions are being
encombrants
made
et
and
ont
rural
souvent
communities are left to
l'impression
the
que nul ne
wayside.
les entend.
Some people are left with the feeling that they are not being heard. And to our overseas territories,
Et de destin, dont nous
where
savons qu'ils
their
doivent
future
être totalement
is in the
réinventés.
hold, we need to overhaul our system. And this is what the government has been trying to do ever since we were created. The task ahead of us is vast but urgent. A vast cathedral that needs to be rebuilt because our nation is worthy of such a cathedral. We need to lead the world in terms of fundamental sciences for maths, physics, chemistry, genetics, for pharmaceuticals, for technology, quantum computing, robotics, global leaders. When we look at other the empires out there, global leaders for space, for naval yards, for nuclear facilities. But all of this is a story of a nation that has climbed great heights. We have been able to bolster our economy, bolster the farming sector, industry, where we have built great assets for our nation. But all of this and all of these vast questions that lay ahead of us are put to you. Thank you for comments, because now I can have a glass of water.
Merci de laisser Monsieur le Premier ministre s'exprimer.
But all of these questions are put to you today as one vital question, a vital urgency, because our very life is in your hands. Our state, our independence, our public service, our social model. It is about managing our spending and managing our debt levels. For your support is the minimum that I need to be able to continue my task. Therefore, I would like to put a question to the National Assembly to have your take on this observation of where our nation currently stands. We are in a state that we have not seen for the past 51 years. For 51 years, expenditure has increased, deficit has increased, debt has grown. Year after year, we have spent more than we have earned. There have been reasons behind this when we have had to push through crises, subprimes, which is a global crisis under Nicolas Sarkozy. Everything we have seen since 2020 with COVID, the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, inflation, and all sorts of threats that we have seen coming our way. We continue to spend what we will not backtrack. This has become just a natural reflex. It has become a dependency. Spending for daily expenditure, for public services, for pension, to pay off a social security system. We are living on a loan. From loan to loan, that is how we operate. For every euro that we have gone over, we have had to take on further debt, just like a household or a company will take on loans from a bank. So €1 of deficit is €1 of additional debt. And the addition of all of those years of deficit, billions every year, has brought us to this stage where we are at 3.4 trillion in debt. This build-up of debt comes at a cost. It means reducing expenditure, what we have to pay off to our debt owners in interests, what we have to pay off just to pay off part of the debt. If we don't do it, we'll be heading into bankruptcy. We would not be able to borrow a single euro more. To think in a nation like ours that we no longer have money to pay civil servants, pension schemes, to no longer pay off interest on our loans. Our current annual repayments go above and beyond what our nation can produce through our own growth. We need to have specific figures in mind because these figures, they're not abstract, they are very real, and they show us something quite obvious, something quite clear. Every single year, on our current growth and inflation trajectory, every year, France produces 50 billion euros, more than the previous year. But against that, when we look at 2020, the installments to pay off our loans were about 30 billion euros, 50 and 30. In 2024, we're at 60 billion. This year, 67 billion. Next year, in 2026, 75 billion. The year after, 85 billion. And at the end of this decade, 107 billion. With 50 billion created by our work and over 100 billion paid off to those who have lent us the money. I'm sure you can do the calculations. All of the progress, the growth that we want for ourselves, for our children, is being given over to our debt holders. 60% of them are foreign. This is expending that produces nothing, that creates nothing. It doesn't improve our services. It doesn't create further facilities for our nation. So our country continues to work. We believe that we're creating wealth, but we are actually getting poorer, bit by bit. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is sapping a lifeblood, and it is unbearable. And if something is unbearable, we mustn't stand by and bear it. We need it to change. And that is the question that we are putting to you today. As the captain of the ship, here I see a ship that is taking on water, that is slowing us down. Our duty, our urgent duty, is to make our ship waterproof. And I try and say that, but then people say, but it's not urgent. It can wait. You're too impatient, you're trying to be too hasty. The boat is still afloat. Don't throw out the crew and the passengers on board. But this is not a divergence in points of view. This is a time where everyone needs to take stock of the situation. What I say is that if we want to save our ship, a ship that we are all standing, on which our children will stand, we must not dally.
La mobilisation de
We
tous
must all
est un
take
effort
action,
modéré de chacun si l'on s'y prend à temps.
and we will be able to
Mais
keep
il
our ship
convient
afloat,
même
but we need
brièvement
to act
d'élargir l'analyse,
now,
de dépasser les conséquences que je décris sur la vie des Français.
because otherwise we will see
D'envisager, je veux le faire devant
the
vous,
lives of French
ce que
men and
seraient
women
les conséquences
impacted.
sur le destin de la France.
Just think
Nous
about
tous,
what the consequences will be.
venions,
Wherever we all come
nous
from,
sommes les héritiers de la
we
France.
are all
C'est ce destin
heirs
unique entre
of
les
the French nation,
d'une puissance moyenne par le nombre de ses habitants, mais
A-
une vocation universelle,
a power
qui nous a fait
on a
ce que
global
nous
stage with just a
Et
few
aujourd'hui, le
million
destin de la
people,
France,
but we
notre
have
nation
great
écrite dans
power. And
l'histoire,
our nation is
trouve
part of the
menacée
history books,
par
and
notre
the history
quotidienne
books
impérieuse.
show us that the present
Pour une nation,
is putting us in great
question de
peril.
l'influence est vitale. La capacité à faire rayonner ses valeurs.
The ability for us to be able to share our values, French values, universal values around the world is under
Le
threat.
droit de l'homme est d'abord le
Human
droit des
rights,
femmes,
rights of
le droit
women,
au respect et à la liberté des femmes,
the rights
le droit
of
des enfants, le
children,
droit à la liberté et au respect de la vie privée,
liberty for
le
privacy,
droit à la libre opinion, à la
to
libre
have free opinion,
conviction, le droit à la libre
freedom
religion,
to
à
hold
la
a
libre
belief,
philosophie, le droit
to
à se
have
former,
a religion,
ensemble de droits,
all of
comme
the
il n'y en
rights
a
that we
jamais
have
de plus complet dans le monde.
are
Depuis que le monde
a
est
list
monde,
of rights which are
tout
probably
cela,
longer than
qui
any
le défend, sinon la
other
France?
country.
Et comment la France peut-elle défendre
So how
cet
can
ensemble de
France
valeurs
continue to defend
qui donne
its
naissance
values and give
en
meaning to those
elle-même et par
values
l'Union européenne,
within its own
si elle
borders and
s'avère
within the
faible,
European Union if
si elle a
it is
perdu sa
weak,
crédibilité
if
en perdant
it is
sa
no longer
souveraineté?
credible, because it is no longer a
C'est ainsi que nous ne
sovereign
sommes pas à
nation.
cet instant défenseurs de nos seuls intérêts.
We are no longer defending
de
our
notre santé,
own
de notre
interests, our own
prospérité.
health, our own
Nous sommes
prosperity.
les défenseurs
We
menacés
are
d'un
defending
bloc de valeurs lui aussi menacé.
a
De notre
group
capacité à
of nations which are
l'indépendance et à
under
la
threat
souveraineté
on the global stage.
dépend notre capacité d'influence.
We need to keep
Du respect
our
que
sense
la France
of
impose
influence
aux
on a
autres
global stage.
dépend le respect qu'on portera à ces
Because if
valeurs.
we depend on others,
La
then our values
soumission à la
depend
dette.
on them as well.
C'est comme la soumission par la force militaire.
Being subject by debt is
Dominé
just
par les armes,
as bad as being
dominé
subjected
par nos créances,
through military force.
Du fait d'une dette qui nous submerge.
Because our
Dans les
debt
deux cas, nous perdons notre liberté.
is
Et dans les deux
submerging
cas,
us.
il ne tient qu'à nous de nous
It is therefore up to
de
us
retrouver le chemin
to
de la
free
liberté.
ourselves from this
Cela ne
debt.
demande qu'un effort sur nous-mêmes.
For that, we need
C'est
to take
pourquoi la
action.
France,
We need
sous
to put
l'autorité
in
du président de
every
la
ounce of
République et par le
effort
vote des
possible, which is why this
a
question is
choisi
being
un plan
put to you
d'équipement
today.
de ses armées, de ses hommes et de ses matériels, la loi de
Because
programmation militaire.
This will guide us
loi, vous
in
le
the
savez, il est
future debates on
nécessaire
laws. We have the law
Non
on
seulement
military
de la
spending.
respecter, mais de l'abonder.
Because not only do we have to continue with the current budget, but we will have to spend
En
more,
raison des dangers de toute nature
given the
auxquels
range
notre
of
pays et notre
dangers
continent sont exposés.
which are on our
Ces
doorstep.
investissements complémentaires nécessaires
This additional
sont inscrits
spending
pour 3 milliards supplémentaires de cette
will
année
add in an
dans le
additional
plan
3
que nous avons
billion
présenté
euros
aux
this
Français au
year,
mois de juillet. C'est pourquoi
as was
la même
presented back in
manière,
July. And that
le
is why
gouvernement propose au
the government
pays un plan pour aller vers le
we'll
désendettement.
put forward
La
a
France
plan to
échappe
reduce
en
our
peu
debt
d'années
burden,
à l'inexorable marée de dettes qui la
so that
submerge.
France will slowly be able to take
En
itself
4
out
années.
of the
Et c'est un
rising
prix raisonnable
waters
dans
of
la vie
debt.
d'un pays et de ses habitants. Ce n'est pas que nous n'aurons plus de dettes.
We
mais
will
notre
not
dette
reach a stage where we have no more
Voilà
debt.
le plan.
It's just that our debt will no longer continue to rise.
En 2029,
In
le seuil
2029,
de 3% des déficits publics
it is said that
annuels,
our debt will reach
seuil
3%
à partir
of
duquel
GDP.
la dette n'augmente plus.
And that is the top
Si la
end
dette
of that
n'augmente
threshold.
plus, alors le
If we
travail
can
des
keep
Français, leur
debt
inventivité, leur créativité,
beneath
leur
3%,
confiance
then
retrouvée remettront
the
le pays à
productive,
flot
creative
sous le
powers
plus
of
vite
French men and
pourquoi.
women will start
Tout
to
nous y invite.
reap
Les
its benefits.
technologies d'un monde qui va de révolution en révolution, l'intelligence artificielle,
Given the world that
notre
we live in,
créativité intellectuelle, culturelle,
our cultural,
artistique, notre
artistic
recherche.
intelligence will help us prevail over
Si
artificial
nous savons nous
intelligence.
libérer de ces chaînes qui nous
If
entravent,
we can
alors
throw
tous les
off the chains that are
épanouissements
binding us,
seront ouverts
then
aux Français
fulfillment is
et aux
within our
générations qui
reach.
viennent.
It is within the
Tout est
reach of
prêt,
our future generations.
tout est
Everything
en
is
germe.
ready for
Ne
us.
manque que la détermination
All we
de
need
ceux
now
qui veulent en
is the
sortir.
determination of those who want to save
Cela
themselves.
oblige à des efforts
This will require effort, moderate effort, to spend just a little less than what is currently expected, to limit expenditure, to spread that limit over time, and to share that message with people within France and outside the world, so that no one will be left to the wayside. And what that means is that we will not leave the youngest people in our nation by the wayside. I received numerous messages from people talking about the younger generations and the weight that is on their shoulders. The youngest people in our nation, they currently bear, and they will continue to bear for the next 20 to 30 years, or even more, the weight of those trillions of euros in debt that we have taken on. But they will bear the weight of it. They will not have the necessary systems in place for them to manage the country, to be able to decide for the future because of this debt. All of the debt that we have taken on has been for just current spending, not for additional facilities. For the past few decades, we have broken the trust, the ties of trust between the future generations and the governing parties. The younger generations feel as if they have been sacrificed. They won't have a pension system, or they'll say, we'll never get a retirement. I know you'd like us to increase the burden on their shoulders, but we don't want to do that. We feel that we need to reduce the burden so that they can be free from the slavery in which we are putting them.
Allez, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît, silence.
Il est simple d'évoquer devant vous le double enjeu que ces jeunes rencontrent.
While it may be simple for me to talk about the dichotomy that we are faced with, we have to talk about the housing crisis for people in our nation, but also the student housing crisis. We need to focus on this for their future. The current situation is no longer bearable from a democratic point of view. It is no longer bearable from a civic point of view, nor from a moral point of view. This awareness of the current situation is so important. We cannot tell the younger generations that we care for them and that we love them if at the same time we ignore the fact that there is an ever-increasing debt burden being put on their shoulders. Every time you call out, I get a glass of water.
Allez, s'il vous plaît, mes
Je
chers collègues.
viens de parler de prise de conscience.
Allez.
Et ayant vécu ces derniers mois cet exercice
Of this past
inédit, je
few
crois, sans
months,
précédent, de transparence entre
I have seen a great level of transparency between people, and I saw
qu'on continue à fermer
how
les yeux.
powerful their message is, even that though there are people who continue to keep their eyes shut to the reality of the world.
La première phrase de cela est devenue « Nous ne nions pas la situation ».
What we now need
Ils ajoutent aussitôt,
to say to
nous
these
sommes
people is
en
that
désaccord avec la méthode,
we
avec
see what the
les
situation is.
avec le
But what a lot of
rythme
people
du
tend to say is that, but we don't agree with the solutions that are being put forward.
Et nous combattrons cela de
We don't agree with the
toutes
means, we don't agree with the measures that are being put in place. And that is why we want to bring down the government that is trying to take action.
Et ne croyez pas que
Others would say, and I hear how powerful their speech is,
qu'il faut mettre à contribution. Ce
the
sont
immigrants
les
need to
étrangers
work.
qui sont la cause de tout.
Foreigners,
C'est auprès de
they're
cela
the root of all of our
que nous
problems.
gaspillons notre argent
We're spending all of it and wasting all of our money on them.
dans la caisse
They're the ones picking from the till.
variante de la part des mêmes. C'est l'Europe, nous nous ruinons à
Others
respecter nos
would say that
engagements.
it's Europe,
20 milliards là, 10 milliards
calling
ici.
for 20 billion here, 30 billion there. It's so easy.
Je suis d'accord, je l'ai dit, pour qu'on vérifie mesure par mesure.
I agree with the fact that we need to look at each measure to see if there are any unusual uses of the measures which are negatively impacting French citizens.
Cette semaine,
And this week,
l'aide médicale d'État
I said we will talk
pour
about
faire entrer dans la norme
state-backed medical
le
systems,
rapport
to make sure that we are living up to standards. The standards which have been placed by Claude Evin and co. But remember, we are the first government taking full account of the report that they put through some 2 years ago. But even when I said that, people spoke up saying, this is sickening. But when we look at all of the savings, we still need more. We still need more because the problem is so vast. On the other hand, we have some people saying we need to tax the rich and the wealthy. Once again, I hear that it is a very effective discourse because Bernard Arnault has become quite an emblematic figure. His and those like him have become targets of a magic bullet solution, saying that they're the ones we need to target.
On m'accordera que je ne suis ni un défenseur attitré, ni un stipendié de ses réussites.
I do not defend nor attack the success of those families, but I also understand what they have done for the nation. Our foreign trade deficit in the luxury sector is some 40 billion euros a year. Their market capitalization and the tourism industry represents some tens of thousands of jobs. Some would say that we just need to take what they have, increase their tax by about 2%, and France's problems will be all but solved. But that is ignoring two key facts. First is that a country like ours requires investors. The 1% of the highest taxpayers take on a large portion of private investment in our production sector. Second, in a world of open borders, those who are targeted the most have a very simple, very immediate response. They just pack up and move. There are so many countries out there where they can find a tax haven, even in Europe. Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands. Just ask what happened in the United Kingdom. They said they would tax foreigners. Those foreigners who had a tax exemption, the response was that moved. A huge boom in real estate prices in Milan. And François Hollande knows too well that this type of taxation is banned by France's Constitutional Court. For many years, it has said that it is predatory and unconstitutional.
Allez, chacun pourra s'exprimer le temps venu, s'il vous plaît. On écoute le Premier ministre dans le calme. Merci. Allez.
Mais je veux réaffirmer ici.
Let me say quite clearly here today that we will have to find a form of contribution so that the highest incomes will be able to pay some form of specific effort so that they can contribute, so that we can continue to also fight against forms of tax optimization and aggressive tax planning. Back in July, I said that parliamentary commissions should be able to take part in that work, the work on a more solidarity-based taxation system. But these measures will not be sufficient. When we look at what some call for, saying that we are going to have 20 to 30 billion in new taxes, and then you have those saying not €1 more. On one hand, you have those saying we're going to take all of the money spent on migrants, and on the other hand, you have those people saying they will fight against them day and night. We need to work together so that
c'est un tohu-bohu qui se prépare pour la France.
that we can prevail, because those people calling to bring down the government, they are just adding to the noise in our state.
Le problème, la menace,
The problem, the threat, the risk that France now faces is still very real and very
mesdames et
present.
messieurs les députés,
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the parliament, you have the power to overturn the government, but you do not have the power to wipe reality,
sera inexorable. Les dépenses
because the reality is still there. Expenditure will continue to rise, even more so than it currently does, and the burden of debt will remain
plus lourds.
unbearable. It will be heavier and more costly.
Il n'y a donc qu'un seul chemin pour
There is only one way forward for our nation
comme dans les années 50,
to move forward.
quand le général de Gaulle est un peu plus tôt
When General de Gaulle, when PM Bayrou France
tous les deux
said
dans le même
both
sens,
that
pour l'un qu'un pays qui
for
n'est pas
one,
capable d'équilibrer ses finances
a
publiques
country that cannot have
abandonne,
a balanced checkbook is one that has lost itself, and the other saying
finances publiques
balanced checkbooks must not be done through further
la
debt.
question précisément qui
They were saying
est
the
aujourd'hui,
same thing, and this is the question that is being put to you today.
dans cette démarche inédite qui vise
Members
à mettre tous les
of Parliament,
parlementaires face à leurs responsabilités
all of you need to face up to your responsibilities as individuals,
qui voient
as
bien
people.
que quelque chose ne va pas,
All of those of you who see that something is not right in our state,
il y a
who
une
want to
certaine
find a solution,
démocratie et du
who have a
gouvernement.
notion of
J'ai choisi de m'adresser à vous
democracy. I'm speaking
comme
to
si le
you.
destin n'était pas écrit.
I'm speaking to you because our fate is not yet written. The National Assembly
N'avait pas été annoncé partout, à corps et à
has
cri, sur tous les tons et toutes les antennes,
a decision to make.
le plus grand nombre des groupes
The decision has not been made for you by the biggest political groups here today. I'm speaking to you, to those who feel that they can still make a decision. When we look at Article 27, the right of vote of members of Parliament is a personal right.
que les mots d'ordre
Thereby, in
n'ont pas
principle,
leur place
you cannot be given
ici.
orders. Your vote cannot be forced. It is your own individual mind, you against your own consciousness.
Tous les partis politiques qui ne font pas partie du gouvernement
All political parties, not within the government.
S'il vous plaît.
tous les partis politiques qui ne font pas partie du
All
gouvernement
political groups not within the government
décision de renverser ce
said
gouvernement.
that they will overthrow the
À
government.
tout relatif, permettez-moi de le signaler, puisque ce gouvernement est sans
Now,
majorité.
That said, interesting because we have neither the absolute nor minority, absolute majority,
Était annoncé depuis la
and yet,
première minute de
ever
son
since we were created, they said they would do everything in their power to overturn us.
apporter ici une précision.
Let me just say one thing to that.
J'ai une haute idée des mouvements politiques.
I have a very clear idea of what political movements are.
Encore aujourd'hui,
I joined a political movement back when I was very young, and I have not
défendu quand nous n'étions qu'une
left my
poignée
political
par encore.
ideals, even today,
Je l'ai porté en
even when there were just a handful of us,
et je suis
and
fier
we
de
were
la génération
against
de responsables
all
qui
others.
m'entourent aujourd'hui.
And I am quite proud of those men and women who work with me closely today. I am convinced
Que sur beaucoup de ces bancs,
that here
le même
in this room today,
d'intime fidélité et de fierté
there is a great sense of loyalty that many of you feel, loyalty to your parties.
Mais les partis politiques ont aussi un
But
défaut fondamental.
political parties also have a fundamental
Si précisément vu,
failing.
y compris à son détriment, le général de Gaulle
And this is something that even General de Gaulle spoke of,
les conduit à la division.
is that they always lead to further division, despite the fact that they bring together. This is what we are seeing today.
Notre pays a le plus urgent besoin
Our
de lucidité.
country needs everyone to have a very clear vision. We need unity,
Division qui menace de
and yet
l'emporter, qui
division
menace
and
son
divisiveness
image et sa
is going to
réputation.
prevail.
Les forces politiques qui annoncent qu'elles vont faire tomber
Political power saying that they're going to overturn the
les forces
government.
politiques
These are the political forces that are the ones who do not agree with each other. They are opposed to each other. They say that they are sworn enemies. They say that their ideas will never see eye to eye, always accusing one or the other. And what these parties are preparing, if their divisiveness were to prevail, it will be great disorder in our nation, where everyone is just shouting and no one is listening, and nothing good will come of it.
Le gouvernement, par ma voix, engage devant vous sa responsabilité.
The government, through me, is putting our responsibility on the line. So, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, the issue that you are tackling today as representatives of the nation is quite a radical decision. It is a decision that you are making on behalf of all French citizens. It requires bold action on your part. If we have your support, if we don't have your support, if you don't believe in what needs to be done, then the government will have failed, and therefore the government will have no reason or purpose.
De ménager la chèvre pour obtenir le chou.
We will continue to try and do our utmost. We will no longer try to sweet-coat things. We will try to avoid us ever heading into a failure. But if I do not have your support, then I will not be the man for the hour. But the truth of the world is that there is a sense of urgency. And the future cannot be built upon ambiguity. We need the support of the nation when action needs to be taken. And for me, that is the top priority as part of our democracy. I never believed in trying to force things through. I believe in trying to see eye to eye. So we will try and have that shared conviction. For me, there are only two ways forward. There is one which is where the rest of the world is heading, where nations are being forced to obey authoritarian regimes, where rights of citizens are being violated in a no-holds-barred type world, leading to misunderstanding, to lead to the most outrageous situations. When we look to the east and even to the west, we used to believe that the American West was a close neighbor. But when we look now and we see a bulldozer type of politics, brute strength prevailing, to rounds of applause of some and wails of despair from others. But we believe in a different project, a project where democracy is fairer, more interesting, more fruitful, one where we respect all citizens, even those the most minority citizens, where everyone is master of their own future. This project is one where we have a shared truth. And that shared truth is the way forward. That will bring our nation together. It will create unity, and it will wipe division from the tables. Thinking back to Max Sandier after the First and Second World Wars, who sat on these benches, he said that democracy and social organization require responsibility, conscious citizens, a consciousness where people are fully aware of the situation. We, as citizens, we are not here to be sentenced to either obey or rise up against the powers to be.
les yeux ouverts.
We are citizens with open eyes and open hearts, truth as our compass. We are a nation that questions not about the future of our country or the world, but about how we can retain that future. So what he is saying, and what we can see in the current climate, is that there is one way forward for our nation, that of truth, a truth that we share, and bravery to see that truth.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre.